Hey, I'm Frank and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be building a dowel jig that works with the table saw. So right here I'm just starting to break down the material. I'm using MDF. I think I cut it to about 15.5 inches wide, and that's going to be the only strip that I use out of this material. I like to use a piece of melamine when I'm cutting long pieces at my crosscut sled. It's pretty slippery and it helps the long workpiece glide over it, making it easier to cut with the saw. So this piece that I'm ripping right now is going to make up a block that will have two different size holes in it, one at 1.25 inches and then one at 1.16 inches. And the 1.16 inches is going to be the final dimension of the dowel. So to make sure everything's centered, I'm going to cut everything to the same dimension. So right here, I'm just going to cross cut all these pieces and then laminate them all together. So with my drill press set up to be in the center of this block, I'm going to cut 3 blocks at 1.25 inches and then 3 at 1.16 inches. I'm going to keep my setup the same as I change the Forstner bit as well. And then just throw in some pretty long screws just to hold everything together. So I'm going to square up this piece that's on top, and that's just going to give a little more rigidity to the base of this jig. Square it up, and then I can go ahead and put that laminated block right up against that, and that'll make sure that this block is square on the jig, and then also centered as well. I'm just going to establish the center of the jig to the saw blade and establish a curve as well. So now every time that I go to use this jig, I'm going to make sure that the saw blade is riding along into that curve. Now that I got a curve, I can mark the centers of the miter slots so that I can put in some miter slot clamps that I took from a featherboard to secure this whole jig to the top of the table saw. So that I have a little bit of wiggle room with these miter slot clamps, I'm going to drill a hole a little bit wider than the machine screws that hold them, just so I can adjust a bit to get the jig just right on the table saw. And then once you slap the jig, you know it's secure. I'm using a piece of ash that was a cutoff, and I'm going to drill an 1.16 inch hole, and that's the diameter of my dowel that I'm making. I'm going to put that on my outfeed table behind the saw blade so that as I'm running it past, the longer it gets behind the blade, the more wobbly it's going to be. So this is just a support. So to secure this to the outfeed table, I put in a couple threaded inserts so that now I can just take this workpiece support and put a couple machine screws down from the top and screw that into the top of the outfeed table. To prep the stock, I create hexagon shape, and that takes on the high spots, and then I keep moving the fence up until the workpiece fits in that initial hole and can rotate easily but not too loose. It takes a little bit of time But once I have established that, then I can run the stock at that dimension. To prep the jig, it's pretty straightforward. I secure it to the table saw, and then I raise the blade until it's just at the bottom of that 1 1/16 exit hole, and that's going to establish the diameter of my dowel. Once the dowel gets sufficiently behind the blade, it starts to get a little squirrely, and so that's when I grab my support block and throw in the threaded inserts in the outfeed table. I make sure to bring the dowel, far enough along so that I can still put it in to that support block as I'm installing it, just to ensure that everything's lined up, and then I can keep running it. With this method, it's pretty easy to run pretty long dowels. This one is about 8 feet long that I'm doing. The farther along you go, I might even add another support block at the end of my outfeed table in case I wanted to do really long dowels. But overall, this seems pretty safe. Dust collection's pretty efficient, and there's really no chance of kickback or anything. I left the back of the saw blade exposed a little bit just so that I can visually confirm that it has stopped. And once it has stopped, then I'll go ahead and pull my workpiece out. One thing to add is that I did put paste wax inside of the support holder just to allow the dowel to spin a little bit more freely, or a little more easier. But that should do it. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.